Cameras capture everything. They catch the sweat on your brow, the tremor in your hands, and the exact moment your heart flatlines on national television. Millions watch Tristan Hayes, the untouchable alpha, the nation's current obsession, look right at me with cold, dead eyes and laugh. He called me pathetic. He tore me apart for ratings. But those millions of screaming fans didn't see what happened at 2 in the morning when that same untouchable alpha was sobbing on my cheap linoleum floor. The studio smelled of ozone, burnt dust, and hairspray. It was a sterile, manufactured scent that usually grounded me. For 3 years, I had been the junior co-host on Late Night with Colin Vance. Well, Colin's punching bag, to be exact. I was the beta-passing Omega who sat at the edge of the sofa, holding the cue cards, delivering the deadpan setup so Colin could spike the punchlines. It was a good gig. It paid the rent. It kept me in the orbit of the industry I loved, even if I was mostly just a prop. Then Tristan Hayes walked onto the set. The crowd didn't just cheer, they ruptured. The sound was a physical force, a tidal wave of shrieks and stomping feet that shook the camera rigs. Tristan soaked it up. He wore a custom leather jacket over a simple white tee, his dark hair artfully messy. He looked effortless. He looked like a god. He also smelled heavily of crushed pine and winter frost, an alpha scent so potent it made the air in the studio feel 10 degrees colder. I kept my smile fixed, my legs crossed. I pressed my fingernails into the cardboard of my cue cards. No one in that room knew that 12 hours ago, that same custom leather jacket had been thrown carelessly over my dining room chair. No one knew that the untouchable Tristan Hayes had spent the night with his face buried in the crook of my neck, whining softly because I wouldn't let him bite down on my scent gland. We had been a secret for 2 years, a dirty, quiet, messy secret that we kept confined to the 4 walls of my apartment. Out here, he was the apex predator of the pop charts. I was just Jesse, the sidekick with a decent jawline and a cheap suit. "Tristan, man, look at this crowd," Colin boomed, leaning over his desk. "They're rabid for you. The new album is breaking records. The tour's sold out. But you know what the internet is really dying to know." Tristan flashed his trademark smirk. It was a slight, asymmetrical lift of his lips that made teenage omegas and betas pass out. "Let me guess. My skincare routine?" "Your love life, Hayes." Colin pulled out a prop magnifying glass, playing to the camera. "The tabloids have linked you to every high-profile omega in the city. Models, actors. But you're notoriously picky. What does it take to get Tristan Hayes to settle down? What's the ideal type?" Tristan leaned back. He spread his legs, taking up space, projecting pure, unadulterated alpha dominance. His eyes flicked to me. It was a fraction of a second, a micro-expression. But I knew him. I saw the panic, masked instantly by cruelty. His management had been riding him hard about his image. The rumors of a nobody boyfriend had been circulating on blind item blogs. He needed to kill them. He needed to prove he was still on the market, still searching for perfection. "I need someone dynamic," Tristan said, his voice a low, gravelly purr that the microphone loved. "Someone who can match my energy, an omega with fire, a scent that knocks me backward." "Not a homebody, then?" Colin asked. Tristan laughed. He turned his head and looked directly at me. The tally light on camera 2 glowed a bright, bloody red. We were in a wide 2-shot. "Definitely not," Tristan said. He gestured vaguely in my direction. "I mean, no offense to Jesse, but could you imagine? I need passion. Not someone who smells like sterile cotton and old script ink. I want an omega who fights back. Not some domesticated pet who flinches when the microwave beeps." The audience erupted into laughter. Colin slapped his desk, howling. My stomach dropped into a bottomless, icy ravine. He used my scent. He used the fact that I washed my clothes in unscented detergent to hide my natural vanilla musk from the network executives. He used my anxiety, the way I startled at sudden noises in my apartment, a quirk he used to kiss my temple for and call endearing. He weaponized our intimacy for a cheap laugh. for a PR shield. Ouch, Colin wheezed, wiping a tear. Jesse, buddy, you gonna take that? The camera pushed in on me. I had 2 seconds. 2 seconds to decide if I was going to ruin my career by throwing my mug of water at the biggest pop star in the hemisphere, or if I was going to swallow the razor blades and do my job. I smiled, a tight, self-deprecating smirk. Hey, my microwave is very intimidating, Tristan. It's a commercial model. More laughter. The tension broke. The segment moved on. For the next 10 minutes, I sat there as a ghost. I didn't hear Colin's questions. I didn't hear Tristan's charming anecdotes about his world tour. I just felt the heat of the studio lights baking the makeup onto my skin. I felt the dull, throbbing ache in the scent gland at the back of my neck, the biological response of an omega being publicly rejected by an alpha they had submitted to. It felt like a chemical burn beneath the skin. When the director finally called out, "And we're clear, we are to commercial," the facade dropped. Tristan immediately turned toward me. The arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by wide, frantic eyes. He reached out a hand. "Jess?" I stood up. I didn't look at him. I dropped the cue cards onto the glass coffee table with a sharp slap. "Great segment, Colin," I said, my voice perfectly level. I walked off the set. I didn't look back, not even when I heard the heavy, desperate thud of Tristan's boots taking a step after me, before his manager's sharp voice pulled him back to reality. The backstage corridors were a labyrinth of exposed pipes, coiled cables, and rushing interns. I navigated them on autopilot. People bumped into me, muttering quick apologies, but I felt nothing. The numbness was absolute. It was a survival mechanism. I reached my dressing room, a converted broom closet with a lighted mirror and a folding chair. I locked the door. I didn't collapse against it. I didn't slide down the wood and cry into my hands. I walked straight to the sink, turned on the cold tap, and started scrubbing the foundation off my face. The rough paper towel scratched my skin. Good. I needed the friction. I needed the sting. I stared at myself in the mirror. Dark circles were already blooming under my eyes. I looked completely unremarkable. Tristan was right about that much. I wasn't fire. I wasn't a tempest. I was just a tired 28-year-old scriptwriter who had foolishly believed that a 2-year secret relationship meant something real. I had bought into the quiet moments. The Sunday mornings when he made me awful burnt toast. The nights he held me through my suppressant side effects, whispering that one day he wouldn't have to hide me. It was all a performance. Tristan Hayes was an actor, and I had been a captive audience. My phone buzzed on the vanity. It buzzed again. And again. Tristan. 3 new messages. Tristan. Jesse, please. You know I didn't mean it. Tristan. My PR team told me I had to shut down the rumors. I panicked. Tristan. Answer me. Please. I'll make it up to you. I stared at the screen. The glaring white light illuminated the small, cramped room. I panicked. I read aloud. The words tasted like ash. You don't casually weaponize someone's deepest insecurities because you panic. You do it because, on some level, you believe you can get away with it. You do it because you don't respect them. I picked up the phone, opened his contact, and hit block. I didn't pack much. Just my jacket, my keys, and the half-empty blister pack of Omega suppressants from my drawer. The commute home was a blur of grinding subway tracks and flickering fluorescent lights. The city of Hanoi was humid, even at night. The heavy air clung to my skin as I walked the 4 blocks from the station to my apartment building. My apartment was small, situated above a noisy 24-hour convenience store. It smelled of stale cooking oil and damp brick. Usually coming home was a relief. Tonight, it felt like walking into a crime scene. Tristan's presence was everywhere. His expensive, ridiculously oversized black hoodie was draped over the arm of the sofa. A pair of his titanium sunglasses sat on the kitchen counter. His spare toothbrush was in the ceramic holder by the sink. 2 years of a life lived in shadows, leaving breadcrumbs of an alpha who didn't exist in the daylight. I grabbed a heavy-duty black trash bag from beneath the sink. I started in the bathroom. The toothbrush, The absurdly expensive organic body wash he insisted on leaving here, into the bag. Then the kitchen. The custom jet flame lighter he used for his cigars, into the bag. The living room. The hoodie. A pair of sneakers he wore when he didn't want to be recognized. The script for a movie he was considering, into the bag. It took exactly 12 minutes to erase Tristan Hayes from my apartment. I tied a tight knot in the black plastic and dragged it to the front door, leaving it right by the threshold. Then, I went to the kitchen and popped 2 suppressants out of the blister pack. I swallowed them dry. They were chalky and tasted metallic, coating the back of my throat with bitterness. Within minutes, the dull ache in my scent gland began to recede, replaced by a hollow, chemical coldness. It was the physical equivalent of turning off a circuit breaker. I turned off the lights. I sat in the darkness of my living room, listening to the muffled hum of the refrigerators from the store downstairs. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't want to hear human voices. I just sat there, letting the cynical, hardened part of myself, the part I had suppressed for 2 years to make room for Tristan, take the wheel. It was over. And the worst part wasn't the heartbreak. The worst part was the humiliating realization that I had seen this coming from day one, and I had let him destroy me anyway. The buzzer rang at 2:14 a.m. It wasn't a polite short press. It was a long, blaring scream of static that echoed through the small apartment. I didn't jump. I just opened my eyes in the dark. It stopped for a few seconds, then rang again. 3 short, frantic bursts. I stood up slowly, my joints popping in the quiet room. I walked to the intercom panel by the door and hit the grainy video feed. The small screen flickered to life. Tristan was standing on the street corner. He wasn't wearing his hat. He hadn't pulled his collar up. The street lamp illuminated him perfectly for anyone walking by to see. His custom leather jacket was unzipped, hanging haphazardly off one shoulder. He was pressing the buzzer repeatedly with his thumb, his other hand shoved into his hair, gripping the roots. He looked unhinged. I pressed the talk button. "Go away, Tristan. You're going to get photographed." "Jesse!" His voice crackled through the cheap speaker. It was thick, ragged. "Jesse, please, open the door, please. Go home. We have nothing to talk about." "I'm not leaving." He stepped back from the camera, looking up at my third-floor window. "I will stand right here until the sun comes up. I will let the paparazzi find me. I don't care. Let me up." It was a manipulation, a hostage situation based on his own fame. If the press found him out here, pacing in front of a dingy apartment building in the middle of the night, it would be a scandal, and somehow it would fall back on me. I cursed softly, my jaw tightening. I hit the door release button. The heavy clunk of the downstairs lock disengaging echoed through the speaker. I didn't open my apartment door. I waited behind it. I heard the heavy, frantic thud of his boots on the stairs. He was taking them 2 at a time. He didn't even wait for the elevator. A heavy knock rattled the cheap wood of my door. I undid the deadbolt and pulled the door open, keeping the chain attached. Through the 4-inch gap, a wave of pheromones hit me so hard I physically took a step back. Alphas in distress are dangerous. Their scent turns sour, acrid, like rotting pine needles and ozone before a violent storm. It's designed by biology to trigger an omega's instinct to soothe, to submit, to comfort. Even through the heavy dose of suppressants I had taken, my lungs burned with it. My hands instinctively twitched, wanting to reach out. I dug my fingernails into my palms until the pain grounded me. "Jesse," Tristan gasped. He pressed his face against the crack in the door. His eyes were bloodshot. The perfect, effortless idol from the television screen was gone. He looked frantic, sweating through his expensive shirt. "Take the chain off. Let me in." "No." My voice was flat. I kept my face utterly blank. "Please." He shoved his hand through the gap, his fingers desperately grabbing at the edge of the door. "I am so sorry. I am so fucking sorry. I didn't mean it. You know I didn't mean it. Greg told me right before we went on air that they had photos of us getting coffee last week. He said I had to throw them off the scent. I didn't think—" "You didn't think?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through his panic like a scalpel. You didn't think about how it would feel to sit there and have the man I share my bed with tell millions of people I'm a pathetic, unappealing joke. You just thought about your album sales. That's not true. Tristan's voice broke. He tried to use his alpha command, a subtle drop in vocal register designed to demand compliance. Let me in, Jesse. It failed spectacularly. He was too broken, too panicked. The command cracked in the middle of his sentence, turning into a pathetic whine. Stop it, Tristan. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked at his fingers, gripping my door frame so hard his knuckles were white. Move your hand. No, if I move it, you'll close the door. I'm going to close it anyway. Jesse, I love you. He practically screamed it into the hallway. I love you. I need you. I can't breathe without you. I left the studio and I couldn't breathe. My chest is caving in. Please. He dropped to his knees. I stared down through the gap in the door. Tristan Hayes, the man who had millions of people screaming his name, the man who arrogantly declared he needed an Omega with fire on national television, was kneeling on the filthy hallway carpet, pressing his forehead against the cheap wood of my door. He was openly weeping. The sound was wretched, deep, tearing sobs that shook his broad shoulders. I'm nothing without you, he sobbed, the words muffled by the wood. I'll quit. I'll fire Greg. I'll do a press conference tomorrow and tell them everything. Just don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like I'm dead to you. I watched him cry. I felt the cold, hard knot in my chest tighten. 6 months ago, seeing him like this would have broken me. I would have thrown the door open, pulled him into my arms, and let his scent wrap around me. I would have forgiven him because I loved him, and because Omegas are conditioned to forgive. But sitting under those studio lights had burned away the illusions. He would promise the world tonight, while the panic and the biological distress ruled him. But tomorrow, when the sun came up and the label called, he would ask for just a little more time, just a little more secrecy. I looked at him, feeling nothing but a profound, exhausting pity. You don't love me, Tristan, I said quietly. You love how safe I make you feel while you conquer the world, but I'm done being your collateral damage. I reached forward and shoved his fingers off the doorframe. He yelped, startled, falling back onto his hands. Before he could lunge forward again, I grabbed the heavy black trash bag sitting by the threshold and shoved it through the gap, letting it drop heavily onto his lap. Your things, I said. Don't come back here. If you do, I'll call the police. Jesse, no, wait. I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. The lock engaged with a heavy final clack. Tristan threw himself against the wood. The door rattled on its hinges. Jesse, Jesse, please open the door! He pounded his fists against it, the dull thuds echoing in the silence of my apartment. He begged. He pleaded. He promised me the stars and the moon. I stepped back from the door. I didn't say another word. I walked back into my dark living room, lay down on the sofa, and stared at the ceiling, listening to the untouchable Alpha tear his own throat out on my doorstep until the sun finally began to rise. Morning arrived not with a sunrise, but with the harsh, mechanical clatter of the garbage truck in the alleyway below. I sat up on the sofa. My neck was stiff. My mouth tasted like copper and chalk, a lingering side effect of the suppressants. The apartment was dead quiet. The pounding on the door had stopped somewhere around 4 in the morning. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The black trash bag was gone. Tristan was gone. For a brief, pathetic second, the deeply buried Omega instinct in my brain flared, panicking at the absence of the Alpha. The silence felt wrong. The air felt too thin. I squeezed my eyes shut, dug my nails into my thigh, and waited for the chemical wall of the pills to push the feeling back down. It took 30 seconds. The panic subsided into a dull, manageable nausea. I went to the kitchen and turned my phone back on. It didn't just buzz. It vibrated violently against the faux granite counter, a continuous angry spasm as notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls, texts, emails, and then the news alerts. Pop Crave. Tristan Hayes, spotted unhinged. outside downtown apartment building at 3 a.m. Daily gossip, midnight meltdown. Is the pressure getting to the nation's favorite alpha? I tapped the first link. A grainy, low-light photo filled the screen. It was taken from a parked car across the street. It showed Tristan sitting on the concrete stoop of my building. His head was buried in his hands. The custom leather jacket was pooled on the filthy pavement next to him. Beside his feet was a swollen, black plastic trash bag. He looked like a man who had lost his mind. I scrolled down. The comments were a war zone. Half of his fans were blaming exhaustion. The other half were dissecting the address, trying to cross-reference it with anyone in the industry. It was only a matter of time before someone matched the peeling green paint of my building's doorway to the background of a photo I had carelessly posted on Instagram 3 years ago. I locked the phone and threw it into my bag. The subway ride to the studio was agonizing. Every time someone looked at their phone and then glanced up, my heart hammered against my ribs. I kept my head down. I wore a heavy black hoodie and pulled the strings tight. I felt like a fugitive. When I swiped my badge at the network security gate, the guard, a burly beta named Carl, who usually joked with me about the local soccer scores, didn't say a word. He just looked at me with a tight, uncomfortable grimace and nodded. The bullpen was worse. Usually the writer's room and the production floor were a chaotic symphony of ringing phones, shouting interns, and clacking keyboards. As I walked through the double doors, the noise died. It wasn't instant, but a rolling wave of silence that followed me as I made my way to my desk. I could feel the weight of 30 pairs of eyes burning into the back of my neck. They knew. In the industry, gossip travels faster than light. They had connected the dots between Tristan's brutal televised rejection of me, my abrupt exit from the set, and his breakdown on my stoop. I sat down at my desk and pulled a stack of script revisions toward me. I picked up a red pen. I uncapped it. I stared at the paper. The words were just floating black shapes. Jesse. I looked up. Colin was standing by my cubicle. He wasn't wearing his tailored television suits. He was in sweatpants and a rumpled button-down. He looked exhausted, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked guilty. Colin. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Look, man, about last night. I didn't know he was going to go there. I mean, we push boundaries, that's the show, but I didn't know you two were... I didn't know. It's fine, Colin. It's live television. No, it's not fine. He leaned in, lowering his voice. He's a piece of work. But you need to know the network is freaking out. His management has been on the phone with the executives since 5 a.m. They're trying to kill the story. Let them. I focused on the script. I drew a neat red line through a terribly written joke about airline food. Jesse, listen to me. Colin placed a heavy hand over my pen, stopping me. They aren't just trying to kill the story. They're trying to control the blast radius, and you are standing right at ground zero. Before I could ask what he meant, my desk phone rang. The harsh electronic trill made both of us flinch. I looked at the caller ID, floor 14. Executive offices. Colin grimaced and pulled his hand away. Good luck, kid. Don't let them steamroll you. The 14th floor was a different world. It didn't smell like burnt dust and cheap coffee. It smelled of lemon polish, expensive leather, and the heavy, suffocating scent of alpha dominance. The air was clinically cold. I was escorted into the glass-walled conference room overlooking the city skyline. Sitting at the head of the massive oak table wasn't a network executive. It was Greg. Tristan's manager was a textbook corporate alpha. He wore suits that cost more than my annual salary, had a perfectly groomed silver beard, and operated with the cold, ruthless efficiency of a machine. He didn't see people. He saw assets and liabilities. Up until last night, I hadn't even registered on his radar. Today, I was his biggest headache. He didn't stand when I walked in. He just gestured to the leather chair opposite him. Sit down, Jesse. I remained standing. I have a run-through in 20 minutes, Greg. What do you want? Greg sighed, steepling his fingers. He looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and appraisal. You've caused a massive problem for us. Tristan missed his vocal warm-ups this morning. He refused to leave his hotel room. He's currently sedated because he was tearing apart his furniture. I kept my face blank. My chest tightened, a phantom ache blooming near my collarbone, but I forced the suppressants to do their job. I slowed my breathing. That sounds like a management issue. It's a you issue. Greg opened a leather briefcase on the table. He's exhibiting classic signs of alpha distress, bond rejection. He told me everything, Jesse. 2 years. The secrecy. The cohabitation. I'll admit I'm shocked. You're not his usual demographic. Get to the point, Greg. The point is, the tour starts in 3 weeks. Millions of dollars are tied up in this. Sponsorships, merchandising. I cannot have my golden boy spiraling because he offended his secret beta-passing writer boyfriend on television. He pulled a manila folder from the briefcase and slid it across the smooth oak table. It stopped inches from my hand. Inside this folder is a non-disclosure agreement, Greg said, his voice dropping into a smooth, practiced cadence. It is ironclad. It states that you have never had a romantic or physical relationship with Tristan Hayes. It states that the incident on the stoop last night was a misunderstanding, a drunken fan interaction, nothing more. I stared at the folder. And if I don't sign, then we spin it, Greg said coldly. We leak that you're a stalker, an obsessed fan who used your position at the network to get close to him. We say Tristan was letting you down easy, and you snapped. You'll be fired. You'll be blacklisted in this industry. And his fans, they will tear your life apart. You won't be able to buy groceries without looking over your shoulder. It wasn't a threat. It was a weather report. He was simply stating a fact. The PR machine was a meat grinder, and I was already on the conveyor belt. There's a cashier's check attached to the back page, Greg added softly, leaning back in his chair. $500,000, tax-free. You sign the paper, you deposit the money, and you move to a different city. You can write your script somewhere else. We all win. I looked at the folder. $500,000. It was life-changing money. It was the down payment on a house, the end of my student loans, the ability to walk away from Colin's terrible punchlines forever. All I had to do was erase myself. All I had to do was legally agree that I was nothing. Tristan's voice echoed in my head, broadcast to millions. Not someone who smells like sterile cotton. I want an Omega who fights back. I reached out and placed my hand flat on the manila folder. I didn't open it. I pushed it back across the table. It slid smoothly, stopping right at the edge of Greg's expensive suit. Greg's brow furrowed. Are you holding out for more? Because this is the ceiling, Jesse. I don't want your money, I said, my voice eerily calm. The numbness was total now. The fear was gone. And I'm not signing your NDA. Did you not hear what I just said? I will destroy you. You can try. I finally sat down, leaning forward, resting my forearms on the table. I looked the alpha dead in the eye. I didn't submit. I didn't look away. But here's the thing, Greg. Tristan isn't sedated right now because of the press. He's sedated because his biology is turning on him. You know how alphas work. He bonded with me. He rejected me. And I locked him out. Greg's jaw tightened. He knew I was right. You can run whatever smear campaign you want, I continued softly. You can tell the world I'm a stalker, but you and I both know that won't fix him. A PR spin doesn't cure biological rejection. The more you keep him away from me, the more he's going to deteriorate. He won't be able to sing. He won't be able to stand under those stage lights without his nervous system collapsing. Greg's alpha scent spiked, burnt rubber and aggressive spice. He was losing control of the narrative. I can have a dozen top-tier Omegas in his bed by midnight. He'll get over you. Then go do that. I stood up. But keep your money. I won't be blackmailed, and I won't be bought. I walked to the glass door. Before I pushed it open, I looked back. Tell Human Resources to mail my final paycheck. I resign. I packed my desk in less than 10 minutes. I didn't own much. A favorite coffee mug, a framed photo of my dog who had passed away 3 years ago, a few customized pens. I dumped them all into a canvas tote bag. Walking out of the bullpen for the last time felt strangely anticlimactic. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked where I was going. They just watched me go. their eyes wide and silent. I was a ghost leaving a haunted house. I bypassed the main lobby and took the service elevator down to the underground parking garage. I didn't have a car, but the exit ramp led directly to a quiet side street, away from the paparazzi that were likely swarming the front entrance. The garage was a concrete cavern. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sickly yellow shadows across the rows of parked cars. The air smelled of gasoline, damp dust, and exhaust. It was cold. I adjusted the strap of my tote bag on my shoulder and started walking toward the incline of the exit ramp. My boots echoed sharply against the cement. Clack, clack, clack. Then another sound joined mine. A heavy, dragged footstep. I stopped. 20 feet away, leaning against a concrete pillar in the dim light, was Tristan. He didn't look like a god anymore. He looked like a corpse. His skin was pasty, pulling tight across his cheekbones. He was wearing the same clothes as last night. The white t-shirt was stained and wrinkled. The leather jacket was gone. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with bruised purple bags, and his hands were shaking violently where they hung at his sides. But the worst part was his scent. It was completely suppressed. He must have taken a dangerous amount of alpha blockers to get past his security and find me here. He smelled like nothing, just sweat and sick desperation. Jesse. His voice was a rasp, completely stripped of its usual resonant depth. I took a step backward, my grip tightening on the strap of my bag. How did you get down here? I bribed the loading dock guard. He wheezed, pushing himself off the pillar. He stumbled slightly, catching his balance on the hood of a nearby sedan. I had to see you. Greg took my phone. They locked me in the hotel. I slipped out through the kitchens. He took a step toward me. Don't! I snapped. My voice echoed loudly in the concrete space. Don't come any closer! Tristan froze. The absolute rejection in my tone hit him physically. I saw his shoulders cave inward. The arrogant alpha who owned the stage was entirely absent. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and shiny with unshed tears. "I signed the cancellation papers, Jesse," he said, his voice trembling. I frowned, confused. What? He dug a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket and held it out with a shaking hand. The tour. I told them to cancel it. The European leg, the domestic dates, everything. I told Greg I'm not doing it. I told him I'm retiring. He let the paper drop to the concrete floor. You said I only cared about the album sales. You said I weaponized you for the PR. So I killed it. All of it. I burned it down. The label is going to sue me for breach of contract. I'm going to lose everything. He took another desperate step forward, his hands reaching out, begging empty air. I did it for you. Please. Look what I gave up for you. Let me come home. I looked at the crumpled paper on the floor. I looked at the shaking, broken man standing in front of me. 2 years ago, this grand gesture would have swept me off my feet. I would have believed it was the ultimate act of devotion. I would have thought he was choosing me over the world. But standing in the cold, harsh light of the garage, with the suppressants keeping my mind razor sharp, I saw it for what it truly was. You didn't do it for me, Tristan, I said quietly. Tristan stared at me, his face twisting in confusion and agony. What do you mean? I just told you. I mean, you did it for you, I interrupted, my voice flat. You didn't cancel the tour because you suddenly respect me. You canceled it because your biology is collapsing. You canceled it because without an Omega to anchor you, you physically cannot perform. You're not falling on your sword for love. You're drowning, and you're trying to drag me down to act as your life raft. Tristan flinched as if I had struck him across the face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You didn't burn your career down to prove a point, I continued, stepping around him, giving him a wide berth. You burned it down because you have no control left, and that's exactly why I will never let you back into my apartment. Jesse. He turned, watching me walk toward the exit ramp. His voice was small, childish. Please, it hurts. My chest hurts so much. Take a pill, Tristan. That's what I did. I didn't run. I walked at a steady, even pace up the concrete incline. I didn't look back. Even when I heard the heavy, muffled thud of his knees hitting the concrete floor of the garage, I kept my eyes fixed on the sliver of gray daylight waiting at the top of the ramp. I stepped out into the drizzling rain, leaving the wreckage behind. Tuesday mornings became my sanctuary, primarily because the world demanded nothing of me before noon. 6 weeks passed since I walked out of that concrete parking garage. The transition wasn't a cinematic montage of healing and self-discovery. It was ugly, unglamorous, and deeply biological. I had to move. Within 48 hours of the garage incident, a rabid fan had managed to geolocate the chipped brickwork from the tabloid photo of Tristan crying on my stoop. I woke up on a Thursday to find 3 teenage girls sitting on the hood of a car across the street, pointing telephoto lenses at my bedroom window. I packed whatever fit into a single duffel bag, left the remaining furniture for the landlord to deal with, and broke my lease. My new place was a cramped 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where nobody cared about late-night television or pop stars. It smelled permanently of boiling cabbage and industrial bleach. It was perfect. The physical toll of the broken bond was far worse than the emotional fallout. Omegas are fundamentally wired to crave the alpha they've submitted to. When that bond is severed, especially when it's severed by a brutal, public rejection followed by a hard, physiological lockout, the body panics. It treats the absence of the alpha's pheromones like a severe chemical dependency. My days became a rigid schedule of symptom management. I woke up drenched in cold sweat, the sheets clinging to my shivering skin. My scent gland throbbed with a dull, ceaseless ache, radiating tension down my spine and into my teeth. I popped suppressants like breath mints just to keep the nausea at bay. The pills left a permanent coating of metallic chalk in the back of my throat and killed my appetite completely. I survived on lukewarm tap water, saltines, and the sheer, stubborn refusal to let Tristan Hayes kill me from a distance. The news cycle, surprisingly, did a lot of the heavy lifting. I didn't own a television in the new apartment, but Arthur, the grumpy beta who ran the corner bodega, always had the 24-hour entertainment news playing on a fuzzy CRT monitor above the cash register. I would go down there to buy instant coffee and stand by the lottery ticket dispenser, watching the slow, agonizing demolition of Tristan's empire. Greg's PR machine had tried to spin the canceled tour as vocal exhaustion. It worked for exactly 3 days. Then, a crew member from the studio leaked the security footage of Tristan tearing his dressing room apart after the interview. Then came the blind items about him ghosting recording sessions. Finally, the label filed a massive breach of contract lawsuit, and the dam broke. Tristan Hayes wasn't a god anymore. He was a cautionary tale. The tabloids stopped calling him a heartthrob and started using words like erratic, unstable, and washed up. "Look at this idiot," Arthur muttered one morning, ringing up my instant coffee. On the screen, a paparazzi video showed Tristan being escorted out of an upscale club by 2 bouncers. He looked emaciated, his eyes hollowed out by flashbulbs. Kid had the whole world handed to him on a silver platter, and he threw it in the wood chipper. Happens to all these alphas. Too much testosterone, not enough brain cells. Arthur handed me my change. He didn't know who I was. To him, I was just the pale, quiet guy from apartment 4B who looked like he was recovering from a nasty bout of the flu. "Yeah," I said quietly, pocketing the coins. "It happens." I walked back up the 4 flights of stairs, my chest tight. Seeing Tristan like that didn't bring me joy. It didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like a waste. He was destroying himself because he didn't know how to exist without an audience. And for 2 years, I had been his most captive audience. I had let him practice his dominance on me in private, so he could wear it flawlessly in public. When I reached my apartment, I went straight to the bathroom. I leaned over the chipped porcelain sink and splashed freezing water on my face. I looked at my reflection. The dark circles under my eyes were profound, looking like bruised plums against my pale skin. My cheekbones were sharp from weight loss. But behind the physical exhaustion, there was something else. A hard, unyielding clarity. I reached into the medicine cabinet and grabbed the blister pack of suppressants. There were 3 pills left. Usually I would panic and immediately call the underground clinic to order a refill. The thought of facing the biological withdrawal raw was terrifying. But I looked at the foil packaging, feeling the metallic taste already coating my tongue, and a sudden, violent wave of disgust washed over me. I wasn't sick, I was just broken. And popping pills to numb the break wasn't fixing the bone, it was just letting it heal crooked. I popped the 3 remaining pills out of the foil and dropped them into the toilet. I reached for the flush handle and pushed it down. The water swirled, swallowing the little white chalk discs, dragging them down into the dark. The next 3 weeks were hell. The fever hit first. Without the chemical barrier, my body finally realized the alpha was gone. My internal temperature skyrocketed. I spent 4 days curled on the cheap, lumpy mattress, shaking violently, clutching a pillow to my chest just to feel pressure against my sternum. The phantom scent of crushed pine and winter frost haunted the room, a ghost conjured by my own desperate neurology. I wept. I sobbed until my throat bled, screaming into the empty apartment. I hated Tristan for what he did to me, but my biology still screamed for him to come back and fix it. It was a humiliating, degrading war between my brain and my body. But I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't look up his location. I just lay there and let the fire burn itself out. Slowly, agonizingly, the fever broke. The phantom sense faded. The throbbing in the back of my neck reduced to a quiet, easily ignored pulse. On a Tuesday morning in late October, exactly 3 months after the television interview, I woke up and realized my sheets were dry. I realized I was hungry. I realized the apartment smelled like boiling cabbage and bleach and nothing else. I sat up. I took a deep breath. I was empty. The bond was dead. The rot was gone. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't Tristan Hayes' secret. I wasn't Colin Vance's punching bag. I was just Jesse. I took a long hot shower, washing away weeks of sweat and sickness. I put on a pair of jeans that hung a little too loose on my hips and a simple gray sweater. I grabbed my laptop, packed it into my canvas tote bag, and walked out the door. I needed a job. I needed money. But more than anything, I needed to exist in the world without a shadow hanging over me. Winter hit the city hard, burying the streets under a thick layer of gray, frozen sludge. I found a job working the overnight graveyard shift at a small independent public radio station. It was a massive step down from national television, both in prestige and in pay, but it was exactly what I needed. The station was housed in the basement of a dilapidated community college building. It was poorly lit, smelled of ozone and old carpet, and the equipment was older than I was. My job was to sit in the soundproof booth from midnight to 6 in the morning, pushing faders, queuing up obscure jazz records, and occasionally reading community announcements in a flat, soothing voice. Nobody cared what I looked like. Nobody cared what I smelled like. The microphone only captured the frequency of my voice, not the baggage of my life. It was during these quiet, solitary hours that I started writing again, not the cheap, rapid-fire setups for a late-night host to spike. I wrote a screenplay, a quiet, gritty drama about 2 people meeting in a laundromat, failing to fall in love, and learning to be okay with it. It was cynical. It was real. It poured out of me like blood from a severed artery. It was 3:14 a.m. on a Thursday when the red light on the studio phone blinked. Usually the only people who called the station at this hour were insomniacs requesting Miles Davis or drunk college students who had dialed the wrong number. I reached out, my eyes still glued to my laptop screen, and hit the speaker button on the console. WKRX, late night, I said, my voice dropping naturally into the low, smooth cadence required for radio. You're on the air in 3, 2... Jesse. My hand froze over the keyboard. The voice coming through the studio monitors was completely stripped of its resonance. It was thin, raspy, and terribly quiet. But I knew the cadence. I knew the slight, hesitating breath that preceded the syllables. The silence stretched out in the small, soundproof booth. The jazz record on turntable 2 spun quietly in the background, a soft snare drum brushing against the tension. I didn't panic. The scent gland on my neck didn't throb. The fever didn't return. I just felt a deep, profound weariness settle into my bones. How did you get this number, Tristan? I asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sound angry. I sounded like I was asking a stranger for the time. I hired a private investigator, he said. The line crackled. He was calling from a cell phone, standing somewhere cold. I could hear the wind whipping against the receiver. It took him 3 months to find you. You completely dropped off the grid. That was the point. I know. A long, shaky exhale. I'm outside. I leaned back in the cheap office chair. It squeaked loudly in protest. Go home, Tristan. I don't have a home anymore, Jesse, he said softly. They took the penthouse. The label seized it to cover the legal fees from the canceled tour. I'm staying at a motel by the interstate. A year ago, that sentence would have shattered me. I would have felt the burning need to protect him, to shelter the great alpha from the consequences of his own actions. Now, it just felt like a logical conclusion to a math problem. He bet everything on a bad hand, and the house took its cut. I'm not letting you into the building, I said. I'm not asking you to. His voice was utterly defeated. I just wanted to see you, through the glass. I'm standing by the basement window, the one facing the alley. I looked to my left. The studio had one narrow, rectangular window set high on the concrete wall, level with the alleyway outside. It was smeared with dirt and street grime, allowing only a fraction of the street lamplight to filter into the room. I reached forward and pushed the fader for the jazz record up, filling the dead air on the broadcast. Then I muted my microphone. I stood up and walked to the window. I had to stand on a milk crate to see out. I wiped away a layer of condensation from the glass with my sleeve. He was standing in the snow, ankle deep in the gray slush. I barely recognized him. The Tristan Hayes who had sat on Colin Vance's couch and sneered at my scent was gone. The man standing in the alley was painfully thin. His hair, usually styled into effortless, messy perfection, was grown out, greasy, and plastered to his forehead by the melting snow. He was wearing a cheap, oversized parka that swallowed his frame. He didn't look like an alpha. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a ghost. When he saw my face appear in the window, he didn't smile. He didn't rush toward the glass. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, and lifted a hand, pressing his palm flat against the dirty brick wall outside. I stared at him through the glass. The heavy, soundproof window killed all noise from the outside world. I couldn't hear the wind. I couldn't hear the traffic. It was like looking at a muted television screen. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and dialed the studio line. I saw him fumble in his pocket for his phone, pulling it to his ear with a trembling hand. You look terrible, I said, watching his lips move a second before his voice reached my ear. I've been in rehab, he rasped. 30 days. For the suppressants and the other stuff. I got out on Tuesday. Congratulations. Jesse? He looked up at the window, his eyes locking onto mine. Even through the grime of the glass and the terrible lighting, I could see the absolute wreckage in them. You were right. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. In the garage, he continued, his voice breaking, you said I didn't burn it down for you. You said I did it because I was drowning and I was trying to drag you down with me. You were right. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the brick wall. The snow fell softly around him, catching in his dark hair. I spent my whole life being told I was a god. Tristan whispered into the phone. My management, my fans, the network. They told me I could have whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted it. I thought I owned you. I thought you were just another thing that belonged to me. I thought I could put you in a box, throw you away on television to save my own skin, and then just pick you back up when I got lonely. He opened his eyes. The arrogance was completely burned out of him. Only the ash was left. I was hollow, he said. There was nothing inside me, just the applause. When the applause stopped, I realized I didn't even know who I was. I don't know how to be a person, Jesse. I only know how to be a product. I listened to his breathing on the line. It was ragged, uneven. This wasn't the frantic, panicked manipulation from my apartment stoop. This wasn't the desperate, chemically driven plea from the parking garage. This was the cold, sober autopsy of a ruined man. Why are you telling me this, Tristan? Because I needed to apologize. Not to get you back. Not to fix my PR. He looked directly at me through the dirty glass. I just needed to tell you that you deserve better than a coward. You deserved a man, and I wasn't one. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I looked at the man who had broken my heart, ruined my career, and nearly driven me into a biological collapse. I waited for the anger to rise. I waited for the bitter, cynical desire to tell him to rot in hell. But it didn't come. All I felt was an overwhelming, profound sense of peace. The ghost had finally stopped haunting me. I accept your apology, Tristan, I said quietly. A small, broken sob escaped his lips. He pressed his hand harder against the brick wall. Jesse, but you can't stay here, I continued, my voice firm, completely devoid of cruelty. You can't call this number again. You have to figure out how to be a person on your own. I can't teach you. I know, he whispered. I know. Take care of yourself, Tristan. I didn't wait for his reply. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hit the red button to end the call. I stood on the milk crate for another minute, watching him. He slowly lowered his phone, staring at the window. Then, with agonizing slowness, he pushed himself off the brick wall. He pulled the hood of his parka up, turned around, and began to walk away, his boots trudging through the heavy gray slush. I watched him until he turned the corner at the end of the alley, disappearing into the dark city night. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of smooth jazz and quiet reflections. When the sun finally began to rise, bleeding a pale, watery yellow through the basement window, my replacement walked through the door. It was an older beta named Sarah, holding a massive thermos of coffee and complaining about the transit system. Rough night? She asked, shrugging off her heavy coat and tossing it over a chair. No, I said, packing my laptop into my canvas tote bag. Actually, it was the quietest night I've had in a long time. I walked out of the studio, out of the basement, and up the concrete stairs to the street level. The storm had passed. The city was covered in a fresh, bright layer of snow, hiding the grime and the dirt beneath a pristine white blanket. The air was viciously cold, biting at my cheeks and freezing the breath in my lungs. It was the best thing I had ever felt. For 2 years I had walked through this city holding my breath. I had washed my clothes in unscented detergent. I had used scent blockers to hide my Omega status. I had shrink-wrapped my personality, my voice, and my very biology to fit into the small, dark spaces Tristan Hayes allowed me to occupy. I took a deep breath. I let my natural scent, a soft, subtle vanilla musk, seep out into the freezing morning air. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't a tempest. But it was mine. I walked down the street toward the subway station. I stopped at a corner food cart and bought a cheap black coffee in a paper cup. The heat radiated through the cardboard, warming my hands. I thought about Tristan, sitting in a cheap motel room on the edge of the interstate. He was fighting his demons. He was starting over from nothing. I hoped, in a distant, detached way, that he made it. I hoped he figured out how to be a person. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Omegas are taught from birth that we are meant to be anchored. We are told that our biology demands an alpha to complete us, to ground us, to protect us from the storm. But as I stood on the corner of a busy intersection, watching the city wake up around me, I realized the lie. The alpha wasn't the anchor. The alpha was the storm. I took a sip of the bitter, scalding coffee. I felt the heavy, satisfying weight of my laptop in my tote bag. The screenplay was almost finished. It was good. It was real. It was something I built with my own 2 hands out of the wreckage of a life I used to live. I didn't need someone to match my energy. I didn't need someone with fire. I just needed myself. I stepped off the curb and walked into the crowd, blending into the rush of 1,000 different lives, 1,000 different scents, completely invisible and utterly free. Love isn't always enough to fix what's fundamentally broken, and sometimes the strongest thing an Omega can do is walk away from the fairy tale. Jesse chose himself over the illusion, proving that you don't need an alpha to write your own ending. Did Jesse make the right call? Or do you believe Tristan's heartbreak was genuine enough for a second chance? Sound off in the comments below. If you want more grounded, gritty BL stories that don't pull their punches, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. We've got more drama coming your way.